The Akama inkstone can be found and mined in Yamaguchi Prefecture in areas stretching from Shimonoseki to Ube West Magura. Also, like the Hagiyaki and Ouchi Nuri in Yamaguchi Prefecture, the inkstone made from the red sandstone shale and the red and green shale has been categorized as a traditional craft by the Minister of Trade and Industry in Japan. The inkstones are said to have been brought to Japan during the Asuka and Nara period, and an inkstone imported in the early Heian period by Nara's Shosoin has been well preserved. The start of the Akama inkstones is not documented, and hence not clearly known. In 1191, the inkstone box that Minamoto no Yoritomo offered to Tsurugaoka Hachimangu in Kamakura City, Kanagawa Prefecture, changed colour from the usual stone-like colour to a colour close to that of the red inkstones, but has not yet been clearly identified. The origin of the name Akama Suzuri is also not clearly known, but the widely accepted version is that it came from Shimonoseki's old name, Nagato no Kuni Akama ga Seki, where they would quarry the gemstone and later trade it. It came to be known as Akama ga Seki Suzuri. When the quarrying extended to parts of Ube City in West Magura, the name changed to Akama Suzuri. There is a clan order inkmaster who gave quarrying rights of some parts of mountains only to order inkmasters, and quarrying would only be done when necessary under his permission. From the mid-Edo period, most of the quarrying and production was moved to Ube City West Magura area. And from the end of the Edo period to the early Meiji period, about 300 people had work related to inkstones. Inkstone making skills are passed on from parents and teachers through time from one generation to another, and therefore have not changed in the last 100 years. The making of inkstones starts with the mining of stones, selecting, shaping, carving, polishing, and ends with the finishing. However, when the demand for inkstones was still high, the steps were specialized, but currently the entire process is done by one person. The three major inkstone producing areas were in the West Magura Quarry in Ube City. Currently, quarrying only takes place at the Ume no Kibatako. The tunnel was dug through stones layered over each other. The stones taken from the tunnel were selected, cut, and preserved, and this is evidenced by the debris thrown in the valley and muro marks which give you that feeling of history. The inkstone is a stone with a very low affinity for water, but some stones at the entrance of the tunnel have weathered and become covered by moss. Quarrying occurs by konai bori, which is also called tanuki bori. The advantages of konai bori include, when not being quarried, rain and underground water fills up the tunnel and prevents weathering by drying up. The water is pumped out before quarrying. This tunnel has a depth of about 30 meters, and one needs to squat in order to get past the entrance. Rock layers usually used for inkstones have a thickness of about 1.5 meters and tend to go deeper diagonally, but sometimes visible green spots can be used to count them. These green spots have been used as marks for quarrying since the old times. The materials, beside the debris and inkstones from the quarrying, are used in the tunnel for maintenance. In this quarrying method, so as to take a big mass out of the stone cross-section and stone quality that can be seen in the stone layers, the outer sharp parts are dug out using a pick hammer. In cases where the pick hammer can't do the job, black gunpowder can be used to make cracks in the rock, and then a pick hammer is used to take out the mass. The dug-out gemstone is taken out of the tunnel. Pebbles are marked with split arrows and broken using a hammer. They are later lightly hammered using a kanazuchi. Inkstone rock selection is done using the sound from this final hammering, and the selected stones proceed to the workshop. The red inkstones are in shapes of cornered, round, elliptical, natural, and so on. The natural shape is maintained, and only the thinly sharp parts are knocked off using the kanazuchi. Besides that, after being cut using a diamond cutter with water, it can be carved using a chisel to make shapes using a grinding stone. The front and back are polished flat by using a rotating polishing machine with water and sand. The borders are carved in order to set the oka and umi using only fresh edges. The height of the edges greatly affects the functioning of the inkstone, and therefore affect the inkstone's ranking. When engraving inkstones, the characteristics of the stones are considered before any additional carving is done. Currently, chipping is done by a small pick run on a compressor using air pressure. After chipping, it can be dug out using a big chisel. Nowadays, big chisels are fitted with tungaloy steel, but back then, regular steel was used and has been passed on from generation to generation. The finishing alone uses about 5 to 10 blades of different sizes to carve the oka and umi with blade shapes such as round, cornered, semi-round and others. Different blades are used for specific parts during the finishing. During the finishing, the blade is held against the maker's shoulder as he applies his weight to it while carving. Therefore, the product is specifically original to its maker. Lastly, a carved mark called nomi nome is removed using a king with a wide breath. The making of the red inkstones commonly seen on the market usually requires a lot of energy until the carving process, and was therefore often done by men. The polishing as well as the finishing steps were done by women in manufacturing households. Water is applied while polishing with a whetstone in order not to allow the inkstone to dry. A water-resistant paper is used to polish while applying water. In order for the ink to rub well, a coarse stone is used for polishing so that the quartz and feldspar, as well as the iron in the inkstone, are brought out to the surface to form the desired roughness. In areas outside oka and umi, lacquer or its substitute is painted using a cloth and wiped clean before it dries up. After this, finishing dust is littered onto it and made to stick by brushing. After the lacquer has dried up, sharpening takes place, after which finishing takes place under the same steps, and the whole process ends when the lacquer dries up. Inkstone sedimentary rocks are affected by the temperature and drying climate at the time the craftsman carves it, in a very delicate process where minute cracks can easily be formed. One can say this for all inkstones. Areas with inkstone making history refer to finishing dust as coloured dust or rock dust and use it for finishing. Because of this, a wide range of beautiful finishings can be made, bringing out the characteristic and artistic skills of the craftsman. The beautiful finishing on Japanese inkstones has a high reputation.
ですから赤い色をしているということはものすごい、優しい色だと思いますよね。温かみのある墨の吸った色がですね、非常に素晴らしい色が出ると。それともう一つはこの石そのものが粘り気があるということなんで、いろんななんていうんですか、模様を彫ることもできますし、加工しやすいと言いますか。やっぱり後継者不足というのが一番大事なことだろうと思います。やっぱり今絶やすということはちょっと私どもから考えると大変これ寂しいことだなと思っています。石があっても職人さんがいなきゃこれ何にもならないことなんで、1人でも2人でもいいですから後継者を育てたいという気持ちがありますんで。すずりというのはですね、一度買ってたらもう松田や墨が擦れるというものじゃないんです。何年か使ってるとその石英というのを摩耗しちゃうんですね。摩耗ということになりますとその突起物が出てない、突起してないということになりますんで、研ぎ出してやらないと墨というのは擦れません。でその研ぎ出してやるというのはどういうふうにするかというと、今のメタル砥石という泥砥石みたいなものが柔らかい柔ら砥石みたいなものがあるんですけれども、それを使って周りの泥を落としてやってその今の石英を研ぎ出してやる。まずその今の研ぎ出しをこまめにしてやるということが一番大事なことだろうと思います。
The inkstones made from the gemstone mined in Ube City, West Magura, portray a fusion of natural beauty and cultural craftsmanship, representing the country's rich cultural craftsmanship. Currently, as a result of the decrease in the use of calligraphy brushes and the number of interested youth to inherit the skill, the number of craftsmen has reduced, but the high quality and the beauty of the products has maintained their demand not only within Japan, but also in other countries. During the manufacturing process, besides the inkstones, the waste material can also be put to good use, making other products such as flower pots, utensils, accessories, and new products like glazed pottery. Because of this, a new fan base is growing for products besides the inkstone. The Akama inkstone is a cultural treasure with a long, rich history and cultural background that we should preserve.